to edition 5 of All Killa, No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri, Pritchard, McLean. Just before we start, we're going to do our usual disclaimer. We're not taking the piss out of anyone who's been affected by murder. We're not encouraging people to go out and murder. Definitely not encouraging you to do that. We're doing this podcast because it's a mutual interest and we're interested in the psychology behind serial killing. And as long as we're doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them.
Episode 5, for me, has been the hardest one so far. We're doing the Moors murders. So that's Ian Brady and Myra Hindley. I found it really, really hard.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because it's quite recent.
Yeah.
We are living 2 miles away from where all this took place.
Everyone I speak to, it still seems to resonate with people. Because it all sort of kicked off in about the 60s, but it seems... And also the tabloids are still really obsessed with them.
They were obsessed with Myra Hindley. And you'll have at least 3 Ian Brady stories a year, I reckon, in papers.
Yeah, they love a bit of it, don't they? So, we're going to go back to the beginning. Ian Brady was Glaswegian, born up in Glasgow. Was raised in the Gorbals, which is like a big, shitty...
rough.
Yeah, council tenement kind of thing, isn't it?
Which, on a side note, Fred West actually lived there for a while.
Oh, did he?
Yes, he did. But we'll come to him in a later episode.
A little bit of trivia for you. His mum was a waitress, a young waitress, who had a child out of wedlock and then gave them up for foster in Glasgow. They never knew who his dad was. They think it might have been a newspaper reporter in Glasgow. So,
I have a feeling, though, that's something that Ian Brady would come up with himself.
Yeah, totally. That his dad was like, he's a very smart journalist. That's the kind of thing that he would come up with, isn't it? But he was a troubled child. He used to be into setting things on fire, which is another sign of a serial killer. Threw his first cat off a tower block at 10. So he started again with the cats.
When is the good age to throw your first cat off a tower block?
Never, in my eyes. Just when you turn into double figures, according to him. He was in Borstal as a kid as well.
Housebreaking.
So he was just a bit of a rum one, really. So yeah, can you imagine though, those poor foster parents? Because fostering must be tough enough.
Oh yeah, definitely.
But because with kids you're like, no one's born evil. And then you end up fostering a kid and like, I really wish he would stop killing our pets.
Yeah, we used to have 4 cats and then we got Ian.
And now we've just got Ian. So yeah, he was fostered out. He actually ended up back after Borstal in Manchester living with his biological mother who'd moved down here. And she had married a guy called Brady and he took his name as a way to sort of try and ingratiate himself with the family. But he didn't get on very well with his stepdad. So he was about 16. So he was just I think to me he's giving off like serial killer signs from a young age. Straight away.
And then once as we'll get to, you find out what he was interested in.
Yeah, he started getting well into the Nazis from a young age, didn't he?
Listening to recordings of Hitler, doing various speeches. He had serial killer written all over him, actually.
They should give that out to parents in general, let alone just foster parents.
Just a fact sheet.
Just a little, little pamphlet that they push through the door twice a year. Where she had not a great childhood. Her dad was in the military and he was quite authoritarian and he was sort of alcoholic, abusive, but that was fairly standard at the time.
Well, when you consider at the time, this, father had been in the army during World War II, he come back, probably post-traumatic stress, God knows what had gone on. Terrible boozer, violent both, to Myra and her mother. Although it's not, excusable, I do think it probably went on quite a lot.
A couple of the psychologists that I listened to said she had a childhood that was very typical of the people in her area of the time. And one of the things they cite is that she came home crying because one of the boys had been mean to her and he wouldn't let her back in the house. And he said, if you come back here without hitting him, I'm going to hit you myself. So she went back and she knocked this kid out, apparently, or knocked him on his ass anyway, and the kid was crying, this little boy. And then she was like, oh, the power.
Yeah, I think the word she used to describe was triumphant.
Oh, yeah, that was it, triumphant, isn't it? And she went to live with her gran at one point, but again, that was
normal.
Sort of
I
normal.
mean, that's a classic northern thing to do.
Yeah, live with your
I
gran.
did that. Proper northern, it's what you do. You get your own way with your gran. But the reason she went to live with her grandma was because her parents had another child, the strain on the household and the money coming in. And she only lived 2 streets away.
Yeah.
It was quite a normal thing to do back then. And she adored her grandmother as well.
Oh, really? Yeah. So much so that she decided to murder someone in the next room.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. So as I've said before with serial killers, they usually have kind of troubled childhood, which Ian Brady definitely did. Say Myra did to a lesser extent. They usually have some life event that makes them sort of trigger event. But Myra had one of those, actually, didn't she? Because one of her friends drowned.
Yeah, she was particularly close to this friend of hers.
Michael. I think.
They were very good friends, and Myra said, "Oh, we'll be best friends forever," and, you know, all that kind of malarkey. Anyway, one summer, there was a reservoir that all the kids went swimming in. He asked Myra to go swimming with them, and she said no this particular day, and he sadly drowned that afternoon when she was meant to go, and apparently she never forgave herself for it, and she was devastated by it. And, you know, I think actually, because for about 3 weeks afterwards, she was wearing black. She did a proper theatrical. She really went over the top with it.
Crying in the street.
Yeah, crying in the street, being dramatic. I think she kind of enjoyed the attention from that. I'm not saying she was. I mean, she probably was upset, but I think once she realised, oh, hang on a minute, and she went around collecting money for a wreath for him, and, you know, making a big show of it. So I think she was obviously a bit self-absorbed.
That she's managed to manipulate someone else's death into something about her. They both work together at Hillwood's Chemicals. Millwoods, that's it. My M's look like H's when I write them down. She had a big fascination with him straight away. Even before she knew him, she was like, who is this tall, dark Scottish guy on a motorbike?
He's so exotic.
Yeah. But she was really well liked by the other girls, because in the first month, I think, she lost her wages, and they all chipped in a bit of their wages, so she didn't go well out for the month. So you don't do that if you think someone's burying kids, do you?
And also, she wasn't unpopular with her friends. She had friends. She had people. She was engaged to a chap for many years.
Oh yeah.
And that just came to an end because what was it she cited? She said
it was unambitious.
Unambitious, yeah.
But we already know what her idea of ambitious is: killing children.
Yeah.
Like, you've got a guy and he goes out with a crazy girl for a bit, and it gets dead serious, but then they break up, and you go, bloody hell, you dodged a bullet there. Like, every day you must be like, oh fuck, I didn't marry Myra Hindley. Although if you did, who knows? It could have not.
Could have ended up. Well, it probably would have ended up very different. It's very unlikely to have killed had she not met Ian Brady, but obsessed with him from the minute she saw him, by all accounts.
Yeah, in her diary, she just goes on like, when will he speak to me? I hope today's the day that he'll speak to me. She's really not just like teenage obsessed, but like really, and she's an adult by this time as well. She's in her 20s, but she's just consumed by him, and I don't think he's all that.
No,
too bony face.
But there is that thing where, you know, if a boy ignores you when you're younger, they're the best thing ever, aren't they?
Well, a psychologist said this, that he had played a very clever game with her, and that's a typical kind of sadist way to do things, and that he would be very nice and flattering about her, and then he would ignore her for 2 weeks. Because that's what happened. He asked her out for a drink, first of all, and then after they went out for a drink, he just didn't speak to her for a month. And then they got together, first date at the cinema, kept it traditional.
The rumour is that they went to the cinema to watch one of Hitler's speeches.
What cinema's showing that?
This is what
I go to this cinema quite a lot, and I've never seen them doing reruns of Hitler's speeches.
I mean, you get the old classics coming out. You know, you might get a Christmas film from the 50s at Christmas.
Gone with the Wind.
Yeah, Gone with the Wind or something. But Hitler's speeches.
But no, didn't they go and see Kiri?
It was apparently King of Kings.
King of Kings, yeah. Which is so similar to a Hitler speech, it's unreal. Tried about educating her, didn't he?
Yeah, and he would buy her books and make her listen to Hitler's speeches that he had on record, and he'd read all this Nazi...
Again, who is making these records?
Well, that's what I was thinking, because it's pretty much easy now to get... If you want to get hold of something, you can get hold of it, can't you?
Yeah.
Most things are on the internet, but back in the 50s and 60s, a record, an LP of Hitler's speeches.
I always wonder how they bootleg things, because now it's really easy to you can record stuff on your phone or an MP3 player, but to bootleg a vinyl, like that must be like, who's sneaking into concerts with whatever equipment it takes to do that?
What record shop has got these under the counters in the 60s?
I bet car boots are full of like knockoff Hitler speeches on vinyl now. So he would educate her. The Marquis de Sade, is it? He made her read, and these books. There was one book that was obsessed with the perfect murder.
Yeah, about Leopold and Loeb, who committed a crime.
They were kids, weren't they?
They were kids, yeah, and I think it was in the 20s or 30s, I'm not sure. But there was a character in the book called Myra.
Oh, yeah.
As well.
That name's not popular anymore, is it?
Myra's not.
That's not coming back.
No.
But it's weird because it hasn't affected Ian, has it?
Nope, still loads of Ians.
Yeah, but
I work with two. But yeah, Myra's Jamie's quite a nice name, really.
I think it is a nice name.
Yeah.
I can't do this podcast and call my first girl Myra. That's just too many alarm
bells. This is little Myra. We've dyed her hair blonde.
And she got staring eyes. She has, yes. You would make her read loads of books. But that book about the perfect murder is two boys who get caught. And then
they get caught.
And then it's the perfect trial, isn't it? So, yeah, he basically... For a while, they were going to rob a bank. He was saying, we're going to rob a bank. And he made her sign up to a gun club in Cheadle.
Which sounds incredibly posh, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Cheadle Gun Club. For anyone that doesn't know, Cheadle is an area of Greater Manchester. It's incredibly posh.
It is, isn't it?
So she joined Cheadle Gun Club, but there was a chap that was actually teaching her how to use guns and things, and he found her too aggressive. Temperament changed in like the blink of an eye, and he didn't think she was suitable to be a member of the gun club.
I'm glad they exercise some caution.
Yeah.
Unlike America, where it's like, you've got thumbs, brilliant.
Yeah.
Here's a gun.
But she did obtain 2 guns.
She bought them illegally, didn't she?
Yeah, from people that were at the gun club. But she never did anything with them. But, that's not an excuse, is it?
No, so they got the guns for the bank robbery, then they got a car.
Yep.
For this, again, under the sort of guise that it was for a bank robbery, even though she couldn't drive.
Yeah, she was driving without a licence.
Unbelievable. Yeah. That's the start of her evils, isn't it, really? So, then he decided he wanted to murder someone.
Yeah. It was quite interesting the way Myra Hindley said that he broached the subject with her. So he bought this book about Leopold and Loeb, asked her what she thought of the book, and she said, I found it a bit heavy going. And he then said, well, I want to commit the perfect murder, and you're going to help me. She said she started crying. Then he hit her, and then she went, okay, let's do it.
There's so many occasions where I'm like, and that's when you should have gone to the police.
Yeah.
And I know it's different, because if you're in sort of like a consuming, sadistic relationship, it's very hard to see the wood from the trees, but also, don't kill kids.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't kill kids if you were babysitting them 4 months ago.
There's so many warning signs, though, with Brady, like the fact that he was obsessed with Nazis. I mean, they used to call Myra Hindley Hess as a pet name.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, God, that's weird.
Yeah, that was his pet name for it. He was obsessed with it, and he was arrogant, and he was manipulative. But like you say, I suppose once you're in that relationship, you can't use it, becomes normality to you. But when he then says, I want to commit the perfect murder, and you're going to help me, that is when alarm bells should be ringing, and you should be like, right, well, it's one thing being interested in stuff, but it's another thing acting upon that interest.
Definitely. And she says that he said, right, go and park up in a car, and then you've got to get a kid from the park. So she sat there I think it was a van actually, sat there in the van and then drove back and went, they were never alone, I couldn't do it. And he was like, no, I watched you could have done it. And then he sort of knocked her about and then raped her, according to her, and urinated inside her, which is pretty horrible. They came up with a scheme where she couldn't not do it, in that she would drive along and he would follow on his motorbike and then flash his lights when they came up to someone that he wanted.
A suitable victim.
Yeah, to murder. And so they went out, didn't they, one night, and this is the night they end up killing Pauline Reed, who's the first of their victims, but she wasn't the intended victim, was she?
No, there was... I mean, obviously the thinking behind it was Myra Hindley would drive a van and it would be, children more likely to get into a car with a woman because, there's no threat there, allegedly.
As kids, you're always told, if a strange man talks to you, don't get into the car or don't go with him. So no one says, if a strange woman with shitty hair pulls up, don't get in.
Well, there was always one where it was, if you get lost in the supermarket, find a woman with children. Although my sister, I remember, because my sister's 6 years younger than me, Mum was telling her about stranger danger and things like that. And she said, okay. She explained this whole scenario to her. And she said, right, so if a man came up to you and he said, I've got some puppies in my car, do you want to come and see them? What would you say? She said, well, I wouldn't get in the car, but I'd just go and have a look at the puppies. No, there are no puppies. You just couldn't get it into
There's
her
never
head.
any puppies. It's just loads of dead cats.
Yes, there are no puppies, okay?
You know Kath, who I live with,
who's
in the sketch group Games Family Gift Shop, she had one of those, when we were kids, they were big in fashion hairbands with the name written on them.
Yes.
Someone came up to her when she was in like Moston Market or whatever and went and said, oh, Kath, I'm your uncle, come with me. Took her hand and started leading her away, and her parents were like, where are you going with this man? It's like, he knew my name, and then she wasn't allowed to wear the hairband anymore. Isn't that creepy?
That's horrible.
Yeah. Pauline Reed, he flashed his lights and she didn't stop, and then he pulled up in front and he started screaming at her for not but she said, listen, I live next door to her.
Yeah.
So we can't take her. It was too close. So they drove along. This is in 1963. And they saw Pauline Reed, who was on her way to a dance. He flashed his lights and she pulled over. And she knew Pauline because she lived next door but one to her sister. So they were familiar.
Yeah.
And this is the line that they used to get her in. They said, listen, or Myra said rather, I've lost an expensive glove up on the moors. Will you come and help me look for it? And then I'll drop you off at the dance afterwards. So she went with her and helped her look on the moors for a glove, and sadly she never came back.
But as you were saying before, is testament to how sort of trusting and good these children were, that she's pulled over. He comes up with a ridiculous excuse, come and help me find a glove.
Yeah.
And she's gone, yeah, okay then.
Yeah.
I'll help you.
That's the worst part, isn't it? Because a little arsehole kid, not that anyone deserves to die, but, a little shit would be like, fuck you, go and look for your own glove. But these kids are just like, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
and she was, I say kids, Pauline was 16, and they didn't find out until 20 years after they were incarcerated, Myra and Ian, that they had killed her as well, because the police didn't suspect that Pauline had been murdered. They thought she'd run off with a boyfriend. And also at the time, in sort of the 60s, no one thought that people were going around murdering kids. It was, I think this case is a big one where it's about the loss of innocence. People were very shocked that a woman was involved in it.
It's astonishing because we need to stop being surprised that women do awful things.
Yeah.
Women can do equally as evil things as men.
Look at loose women.
Look at loose women, exactly.
But no, I think you're dead right that this whole kind of... Because that's why everyone's obsessed with Myra over Ian Brady, even though he was the one that definitely did the murders. Although I do think she was more involved than she says.
Yes.
That they're like, it's because it's a woman, and you just think, but you were meant to have babies and be a mum. You're not meant to hurt people. It's men that do awful things.
Yeah. Women can do horrendous things as well.
Yeah.
Although I'm not sure she would have done anything had she not met him. Definitely the catalyst for...
I agree with that.
This
I think she would have been an arsehole.
Oh, she would have been
a twat at work.
She'd have been a nightmare to work with. She'd have been arrogant.
Bully.
She'd have been bossy. She'd have been a bully. But I don't think she'd have been a murderer.
Then she thought, that's it now. He's done the murder. We'll get away with it, and then that'll be over. But he killed Pauline, or they killed Pauline in 1963, July.
Yeah.
And then in November, he was like, I want to do another one.
Yeah.
And that's when they killed John Kilbride. So he went missing, didn't he, at Ashton Market?
He was on Ashton Market because apparently he used to... So when the stalls had all finished, he used to sort of hang around and see if there was anything he could pick up, which a lot of kids did. And they asked him if he could help to move some boxes. And first of all, they said to him, which is incredibly awful, they said, you better get a lift back with us because your mum and dad will be worried about you being out this late at night.
That's the worst.
Which is just horrible. And then they said, we've got some things you can help us with. And they said they'd give him a bottle of sherry, but the bottle of sherry was at their house. I think they were obviously intending to kill him at their house.
Yeah.
But then decided not to and went up onto the moors to look for the glove again.
Fucking glove.
That fucking glove. So yeah, it was thoroughly unpleasant.
He was only 12, and when he was killed, the police were convinced they didn't look for anyone because they were convinced it was his dad. Even though his dad had an alibi, they were like, no, it's got to be the dad, it's always the dad. So poor Pat Kilbride was always getting dragged in for questioning, and then would get people in the street going, you're a child murderer. Like, not only the horror of having a child go missing, but then the horror of everyone thinking it's you.
Everyone blaming you.
And they killed again in 1964, July, little Keith Bennett, who is the most adorable looking kid in the world. If you Google him, he's just so cute with his little glasses on. Now, he, to me, is one of the sadder ones. They're all horrible because he's still missing.
Yeah.
They never found his body. And his mum used to go up there and look.
Yeah, every weekend.
And
apparently.
she died 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
He was walking to his grand's, Keith Bennett, and they said, will you help us? And did the old glove trick and then got in the car. Yeah, he went with them and was killed. And apparently when he was up on the moors, because they were walking along, he's like, it's lovely up here. I'll bring my mum up here. She'd love this. And then he went, I better be getting back to her now. And that's when he killed him. I
mean, there must have been little moments of panic for the children that they took up there. There must have been a moment where they just thought, hold on a minute.
Yeah, am I not safe
This isn't right. And also Myra Hindley saying, I wasn't involved in the murders. Ian Brady took them over the moors and he did whatever it was he did to them and he killed them. I don't believe her. I 100% believe she was fully involved in all of those murders.
Yeah, because it's bullshit, isn't it? With Leslie Ann Downey, who's the next person that we'll be talking about, they were like, where were you when she was murdered? She was like, I was looking out a window. And it's like, no, I don't believe that you were. And it's weird, it's like, what did you do while he was raping and murdering them? Oh, I just sat in the car.
Just waited in the car.
No, he fucking didn't wait in the car. It's not a trip to a supermarket.
Yeah.
She was with him. Because some of them were like 16, 17 strong young people.
And for one person to try and restrain and rape and murder a person of 16, 17, I don't think that's possible. I think you'd have to have two. I don't think Brady looks particularly strong.
No.
I think there would have to be
She
two
was definitely involved. It's Keith Bennett to me is the one that's so sad. It's like you go drive over the Pennines and every time I see that sign for Saddleworth Moors, I'm like, there's kids there that we don't know about.
Yeah.
Because periodically they'll search, and they took Myra Hindley out there twice to try and find out where the body was. This is after her 20 years into her sentences admitting that there were more. They basically admitted
suddenly remembering.
Because they were prosecuted for 3, Edward Evans, John Kilbride and Leslie Ann Downey, and then they both kept fucking quiet for 20 years, and then they said, it was Ian Brady in fact who said there was more, but only because he thought Myra was going to confess and he wanted to sort of pull away her trump card because they'd fallen out by them, and they said, actually we killed Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett, who they'd sort of suspected that they had something to do with, although I think there was more. And there's not just horrible behaviour from Myra Hindley and Ian Brady either, because I watched an interview with Winnie Johnson and she was saying that someone had come up to her and said, are you Keith Bennett's mum? And she was like, yeah, and she went, they chopped him up and fed him to the pigs. And I was like, who does that?
What is wrong with
Who takes this poor family and tries to give them more suffering? It's like, because I always think, like trolls on the internet, it's like, oh, that's a new phenomenon, but it's not. People have been horrible.
No, people have been horrible for years. Yeah. Except now they've got more of an outlet to be horrible, haven't they?
Yeah, now they have to do it with 140 characters.
Yeah, and be anonymous most of the time.
Yeah, very brave. Ian Brady went to the moors once as well, and he always said that if you take me to the moors, I'll show you exactly where his body is, but you have to give me the means to kill myself afterwards. And they're like, no, we're not going to do that. But apparently he's written a letter to Winnie Johnson that was to be for her when he died. And they think it's where they buried Keith Bennett is, but that letter's sort of gone missing. It was given to sort of a liaison officer, and then she sent it back to him, and they tried to find it just before Winnie Johnson's death, but they couldn't find it in time.
Why didn't they just open it? Because really, I mean, I know people still have rights when they're in prison or whatever, but that's potential evidence for something that could be resolved. Just open it. Don't lose it. How'd you lose it?
Well, she gave it back to him apparently because it was addressed to Winnie Johnson, and then she gave it back to him. She lives in Wales now, I think, and they searched her house in 2012. That took 10 hours, and they couldn't find it. In 1964, December, they killed Leslie Ann Downey. Now, like all serial killers, they were keeping trophies. So, like, they had a shoe from John Kilbride and bits and pieces. And pictures is how they would do it as well. They would take pictures of the grave sites that sort of became a code, and where Myra was pointing, you could figure out where the grave sites were.
And usually running around with a dog.
Puppet the dog. Well, I wonder what happens to these dogs, because Dennis Nielsen had a dog called Bleep, didn't he? Like, what happens to do they just get like? We're just gonna have to put you down because no one wants a dog that's seen murder.
I love dogs, and I'm interested in serial killers, but I'm not rehoming a serial killer's dog. I'm sorry.
It's not the dog's fault.
I know it's not, but that dog's seen stuff. That dog chewed stuff it shouldn't have been chewing.
I think they might have eaten it.
I just think, especially Bleep.
I'm sure that I read somewhere that there is like an animal home for not evil dogs, but like there's an animal rescue place for dogs that have been a part of murders.
Oh my god!
So you've got like Bleep in there. Puppet the dog, although Puppet was killed. Found these pictures that they'd taken on the moors, and they needed to find out what year it was to sort of tell from the plants and stuff what time of year. Where they could do it was by aging the dog, so they needed to work out how old Puppet was in the first place. Put Puppet under anaesthetic, and Puppet died during this procedure. And Myra went absolutely mental, apparently. And was
called them murderers.
Yeah, cold-blooded murderers. Yeah, those people are awful, aren't they, Myra? So yeah, Puppet was killed, so Puppet isn't in home. But I'm sure I'll look into it. But I'm definitely sure that there is a rehoming place.
I'll find it. Let's talk about it next episode. I'd like to hear more about this rehoming place.
Maybe we can do some voluntary work.
Maybe we could, yeah.
So Leslie Ann Downey. Oh god, this is a really sad one as well. They took pictures of her being tortured in their house. And this is the one that dropped Myra in the shit.
And this is on the 26th of December as well. This is on Boxing Day.
They took her from a fair. Didn't they drop some shopping? And again, these are all really helpful, lovely kids.
Yeah, so they pretended, we dropped some shopping, can you help us carry this shopping back to the house? And she was like, yeah, okay, I'll do that, no problem. Horrendous. But like you say, tied the poor child up. She was 10 years old. Tied her up, took pictures of her, abused her, and the worst thing about it is they recorded the whole thing on a tape. So this is where Myra Hindley really hasn't got a leg to stand on, because there's a tape, of which I've never listened to because I don't want to, but there was a police officer on a documentary talking about it, and he said it was the worst thing he's ever heard, because it had, like, I think it's a Little Drummer Boy Christmas music before they taped over that song. So that was on before and after, and in between it's this kid being tortured, and she's screaming at the kid. The kid just wants to go home, obviously, it's frightened, saying she wants to go back to her mum. Myra Hindley's shouting at her to put the gag back in her mouth.
Yeah, just telling her to shut up.
Telling her to shut up.
Until they found the tape, she's like, no, I didn't know anything, no, I had nothing to do with it. And they're like, right, well, we found a tape of you where you're very clearly involved, and it's so sad. What they had to do to identify both Myra Hindley and Leslie Andani is they had to play some of the tape to the poor fucking kid's mother, and they had to show her some pictures and goes, this is your daughter, and they said, right, we're going to show you the two least upsetting ones, and it was like the poor kid was like naked and tied to a chair and gagged. Anne King is the name of the mum, and she was saying, I just kept thinking those are the two least bad, and she's just getting so upset because she's saying in the tape, she's going, just take me home and I won't tell anyone what you've done, I just want to go back to my mum. And imagine hearing that as a mother, it's awful. And Leslie Andani is another one that family I feel so sorry for, because I saw a documentary and they've had to hide her grave, had to move it because people were desecrating her grave and being like, saying horrible things about the kid and being like, free Myra, Myra's innocent, and all this kind of stuff.
People are mental.
They are.
I'm never like, there's no shortage of nutters, is there?
No,
really?
It's a fairly fresh, steady supply. I just think the whole process of having to go through and identify from that is absolutely horrendous. And then the last person they killed, allegedly, I think there's more.
I think there's probably more.
Because these pictures, they used to take pictures by the gravesites, didn't they, of settlement more? But there's pictures of them all over the place, isn't there?
There's pictures of them in Peak District, there's pictures of them in North Wales. After they were convicted, Hindley and Brady were allowed to carry on corresponding with each other from the separate prisons, and Ian Brady was obsessed with getting a certain amount of photographs back. Police still had, and he was obsessed with these photos, and he used to get Myra Hindley to write to her mother saying, can you get me these pictures? And that's all she used to ask her mum, I want these photographs, can you get these photographs? Ian wants these photographs. So there's obviously something in that. I mean, Edward Evans would have been the last victim, but there will have been, I think there'd been more before that. I mean, why wouldn't there be?
Definitely. Well, if they kept two hidden that the police sort of knew they were responsible for anyway, and bearing in mind at this time, if anyone went missing, no one was thinking it was anything untoward anyway. And so Edward Evans was the last one. Now, Brady tried to recruit someone else into their little horrid gang, and that was David Smith, wasn't it? Which is Myra's sister's husband. So Myra's sister Maureen, it was her husband, and he was sort of a petty thug and criminal, wasn't he?
I don't think he wasn't the sharpest tool in the box. I think he admired Brady to a certain extent. He was sort of bowled over. He thought he was intelligent, and he was like, oh, he wants to be my friend, and he was just a bit impressed by him.
Yeah, because Ian would be like giving him books to read, and then he'd copy out bits from it that Ian had underlined to help him understand them. So I think he was just thick as pig shit, but a bit violent.
Yeah.
And they just recently, he and Maureen had lost a baby, so apparently he was very sort of depressed and low, and that's when they were talking about a bank robbery, but they just sort of dropped him into a murder. So what happened was they went over to Myra and Ian's house, Edward Evans, who they picked up at a train station.
Manchester Central, which is also where they found tapes. There was a suitcase in the left luggage department there. But Manchester Central Station became GMEX, which was a concert venue, and it is now Manchester Central Convention Centre. And aside from Brady picking up Edward Evans there and murdering him, and the tapes being stored there, the most horrific thing to happen there in the past few years has been the Tory Party conference.
When will the evil stop? Maybe they should knock it down, because they knocked down the house that they did the murders in, didn't they?
They did.
Because they didn't want it to become like a shrine or the kind of house that you can never sell.
And constant press interest, people constantly going past, taking pictures, and then journalists still doing stories from outside there. It becomes,
So they picked up Edward Evans in a train station, brought him back to their place. Was he 17? And then Myra was like, oh, can you give me a hand with something in the kitchen? I've just dropped something. And then David Smith went through at the exact point when Ian Brady caved in Edward Evans' head with an axe and was like, what the hell? Helped them clean up, went home, and then called the police straight away.
And bearing in mind, this is Hindley's grandmother's house, which they were both living in.
Yeah, Nana was upstairs.
She was upstairs in bed.
That's some shitty hearing, isn't it?
Oh,
it's
awful.
Myra was furious when he went to the police, because she was like to Ian, like, we never should have let anyone else in. But Ian had got bored of Myra, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Because he said that she had become unquestioning. And he was like,
She wasn't challenging him. I think, though, with David Smith, I mean, he did the right thing. He was obviously terrified. And although he admired Brady and he felt flattered probably that he was taking interest in him, and he probably, listened to the Nazi tapes and he did all the rest, he didn't know that they were out on the moors killing people.
No.
And it's a long way between having an interest in something and acting out something, isn't it?
Yeah, well, look at us.
Yeah, exactly.
We haven't got the time.
We'll do this podcast and have a lovely cup of tea and then it's fine. But he must have been frightened, and he did the right thing. He went straight to the police. As soon as he thought it was safe to do so, he went to the phone box.
Yeah, he did the thing that Myra never did, which was go, oh, this has gone too far.
Yeah.
I know I'm going to get in shit for this, but someone needs to know. And so what happened was the police knocked on their door, some undercover policemen in a Sunblessed, is it Sunblessed?
Sunblessed,
yeah. Yeah, the bread, he had a shirt with a Sunblessed logo on it, and apparently Myra Hindley opened the door and went, no, we get mother's pride, was the first thing she said, which is a really fucking bizarre thing to say. And then they were like, actually, we're the police and we're arresting Ian Brady on suspicion of murder. And then she brought him in and they started to search the house, and he said to Myra, oh, you better unlock the spare room. So she unlocked it and took them upstairs, and that's where Edward Evans's body was sort of tied up and trussed up and cut up in the corner. So they arrested Ian Brady, and then 5 days later they arrested Myra Hindley, because at the time they were like, oh well, no, the lady can't possibly be involved in it.
A woman couldn't commit a terrible murder. She wouldn't have known anything about it.
So she had 5 days to destroy evidence and to clean up and do all this kind of stuff. But I doubt she had time, because she was at the police station all the time, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was. Is Ian alright? How's Ian? Checking on Ian all the time. And then, as one of the ladies in the documentary said, nonchalantly eating a cream cake outside the co-op.
Yeah, she's like, I remember when Myra was taken in, I saw her and her mum outside the co-op, and there she was, just nonchalantly eating a cream cake, which is a beautiful set of words. It's like an Alan Bennett, isn't it? Right, so the trial. This caused outrage because they escaped the death penalty by, 3 weeks?
Something like that, yeah.
Really small amount of time.
We were really upset by this, which you can understand at the time. I mean, these horrible murders, and they'd think they're being shortchanged with the justice. But having said that, though, I mean, Brady would probably rather have been hanged.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So in a way you go, although they've been very expensive over the years, that you think this is what you least wanted, so it's probably the best thing.
If he had been executed, we wouldn't have had the information about the other murders a bit later on. So it just shows it's not for the best every time, is it?
When the judge sentenced them, he sentenced them to life. And then you're meant to, when you go, I sentence you to life imprisonment with a recommendation of no parole for at least 15 years.
And then you hit the thing.
And you go, dink, like an auction. Yeah. And hit the thing and it goes, dink.
Dink.
That's the campest court ever. Ding,
That's
ding.
like the Fisher Prize, my first courtroom, isn't it?
Oh God, I bet there is one of those as well. Then he just said, I sentenced you to life in prison, and then he sort of retired, and the barristers followed him through and said, yeah, but how long? He was like, no, life. I want them to spend life inside. It was sort of renegotiated after a while that they should see that life is 30 years. So he's still in there as we record this. He'll probably listen to this as well.
Oh, we'll probably listen to this, yeah.
Our listenership is just serial killers and my brother. I think that's
and a couple of my mates from work. Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for listening. So yeah, he's still in there. She died of pneumonia in 2002. In fact, because we're recording this in November, it probably won't come out until the new year, but we're recording it the day after she died by coincidence, because she died on November the 15th. Apparently they were passing notes to each other in courts. Because what's really hard to... I think they are evil, don't get me wrong, and beyond sort of apologies and remorse, but you never know with the tabloids how much is bullshit, because they're saying that apparently they passed notes to each other in court saying that they wanted to torture kids and pour acid down their throats, but it could just be like, the Sun.
Well, I can see both sides. That it's the kind of thing a dramatic tabloid newspaper would make up, but it's also the kind of thing Ian Brady would do on purpose to go, oh yeah, look at this now, oh yeah, as if that's what I want. It's the kind of thing he would do. So I can see from both sides, but I mean, would they be allowed to pass notes to each other?
No, surely not. But there's been loads of cases of court trials where they've still communicated with each other.
But having said that, they carried on writing to each other for 5 years after they were incarcerated.
You think they shouldn't have been allowed?
No, I don't. I just don't think they should be. Why should they? You've committed these awful crimes together. You're in separate prisons, and yet you're still allowed to write to each other.
The police read them, don't they? So there could be something in there. It's like, oh, don't tell them about the other one. They'll be like, right, well, we need to check.
But then again, if they know their letters are being read, they're not going to write anything, are these?
No.
They're very arrogant. I just find it astonishing.
In 1985, Brady was declared criminally insane, which is like, sounds badass, doesn't it? But he is clearly bonkers. Like, the shit he comes out with, he's so mad. What's interesting about Myra Hindley is she was never found to have anything particularly wrong with her. She was never found insane or anything like that. So she's just a piece of work.
Yeah.
Trying to be polite, but yeah, she's horrible. He didn't appeal because he said he should see out the rest of his days in prison, although he does want to commit suicide. They used to write to each other, and they stopped in like 1974 because he badgered her to get these pictures for a start, which is how the police sort of started to find the other two bodies from these pictures. She didn't like the relationship. She was like, oh, he's always been mean to me, because it's really inane.
He never takes me anywhere. We never go out anymore.
We used to have fun. Do you remember that? The letters she writes to her mum are all sort of really like trivial and vacuous, aren't they?
Bring us a box of Maltesers. That was one. Like when she was awaiting trial. Oh, can you get me this makeup? It's angel face. Oh, dear ma'am, they won't let me dye my hair. Oh, can you bring us a box of Maltesers next time you come in? Then there was one like, Ian's mother brought us a roast chicken dinner on Christmas Eve. It was just like being at home. Bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, and while she was in prison, she entered a talent competition, like an artistic, creative thing, and she sung and recorded. She taught herself how to play guitar when she was in there. And she recorded a song, and she won the competition. She won like 500 quid, and she sent it to her mum. Was like, buy yourself a nice blouse. I was like, send her it all. What are you going to buy with it? Shower gel.
Yeah, what are you buying in prison?
Stocks and shares. Right. This is the reason why I don't think that she was sorry. Or as innocent as she claims, because she tried to escape.
Yeah.
There was a prison officer called Pat Cairns who used to work in her prison, and apparently when she walked in, she was like, who is that? Now, I've seen pictures of Pat Cairns, and I would say who is that, but with a very slightly different intonation on it. She looks like she lives in the rafters at Notre Dame. I've never seen anything like it. Yeah, she's now in prison as well. Basically,
what, for being too ugly?
Yeah, they should. If they were going to put people inside, they'd start with Pat Cairns. I swear to God, she's got calluses on her knuckles where they drag on the floor. It's unbelievable. She sort of fell in love with Brady. They have a love affair. And then she with Hindley.
Oh, Jesus, not Brady.
Imagine that. Imagine the three-way there. Because by this time, Myra had gone what they call prison bent. Now, I didn't know this was a phrase, but I listened to a documentary. It's very posh woman said, during her time in incarceration, Myra Hindley began to have lovers, lady lovers. She became what's known as prison bent. So Myra was prison bent, and Pat gave her keys to make copies of. So they had a woman there that they knew who carved it out of soap, the different key heads, sent it off to a guy outside and said, can you make a copy of these? He got them and went, hello, is that Greater Manchester Police? I'd like to report someone trying to break out of prison. And so Pat Cairns was arrested and served 6 months in prison, and Myra, as soon as that happened, stopped communicating with him. She is a piece of work. And then she decided, after she got moved to a higher security prison in Durham, Cookham Wood, and she decided that she felt remorse because she realised she wasn't going to get parole, because actually her case is sort of illegal. So she was meant to stay in prison for 30 years, and then it was 31 years and she appealed. And then Michael Howard, who was the Secretary for Justice or whatever, Home Secretary at the time, said there's no way she's ever going to be let out. And everyone was like, well, not everyone, but a lot of people were like, that's sort of illegal, that she should have been let out by now. And he was like, no, she'll never go out. A few years later, that created another change in the law that said that politicians can't dictate what happens in the justice system.
No politician was ever going to be responsible for freeing Myra Hindley.
Yeah.
Was it? Who's going to want that on there?
Yeah, can you imagine? That's all that Tony Blair would need as well. Like, oh, brilliant, you take us to a right, and you let Myra out, great. We'd have had the Tories 4 years earlier if that had happened. But then she decided that she realised that she wasn't going to, pretending she was innocent, she wasn't going to get let out. So she started to communicate with a biographer and a police officer about what happened and started to hint at the other two murders. Ian Brady got wind of this and went, fuck that noise. And he went, yeah, we killed 2 more.
Yeah.
And they're on the moors. So then, 20 years later, Pauline Pauline Reed and Keith Bennett were also linked to the Moors murders, and they went up to find them, and after a few months they found Pauline Reed's body, and as we know, they never found Keith Bennett's, which is incredibly sad. Myra Hindley, when she was in Durham, got into another relationship with another professional in the prison service. She was a criminologist called Nina Wilde. You can actually find an article she's written on the Independent's website, like a full interview with her, talking about what a lovely woman Myra Hindley is, and how they began their love affair, and how I saw this lady with lovely dark hair doing the cleaning and making the tea, and then I found out it was Myra Hindley, because she said, I didn't know that she was a part of the Moors murders, because she's from Holland.
Like,
this woman.
So you're a criminologist and you've never heard of the Moors murders? I'm not having that one. It's like, I suddenly forgot about the Moors murders when I saw a lovely face in there. No, I'm sorry. Why are these people entering into these relationships anyway? I mean, it baffles me every time. Like, you're a professional person with an important job, yet you want to get off with Myra Hindley.
Yeah.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is strange. Or do you think it's sort of like they become like that once they're in the system? Or do you think that system attracts that kind of person?
I think it attracts that kind of person.
Yeah, I think so as well. Apparently she was pals with Rose West when she was in.
Yeah, this is something that I think it was Cook and Wood, actually. Apparently, the rumour does come from a very good source. It was a Brian Masters book. Myra Hindley and Rose West were apparently quite pally, because Myra Hindley was moved to the same prison for a while. They were sort of the top dogs amongst the other prisoners.
Jesus, that's grim,
and
isn't it?
They used to watch Prisoner Cell Block H together.
That's so meta, isn't it?
It's just...
Watching bad girls together. Going, it's so dramatic on here. It's nothing like that in here.
Quite interesting, but whether it's 100% true or not, I'm not sure, but I kind of want that to be true because it's just so weird.
I was listening to an interview with a prisoner who knew Myra well, and she said that she was sort of like a bit of a celebrity in prison. She like really enjoyed her notoriety, and they said the guards used to give her sort of specialist treatment because it was an exceptional case. It was like, Myra just sort of ran the place. Which...
Can you imagine she would have enjoyed that, though?
Myra
Hindley? Yes, I do think she would, because if you look at it, I mean, everything we know about her, she was manipulated by Brady to a certain extent, we know, but she still went ahead with all these killings. She was arrogant, she was an arsehole. Like we've said, if you worked with her, she'd have been a bully, but she loved being the top dog.
Yeah, well, she felt
Until I've watched Prisoner Cell Block H, top dog.
She was really angry about being in prison. She's like, I don't even get to vote in here. She felt like she was being really badly treated, which just shows the arrogance.
I don't even get to vote in it. Well, those kids on the moors don't get to vote either,
No.
Myra, actually. So
they all didn't reach voting age.
Yeah.
And had it taken away from them. Yeah, it's very... Yeah, I just found this one so hard to even talk about. I don't know what it is, if it's because it's recent and because it's kids, and if it's... but I think it might be a collection of all those things, and the fact that it's kind of a woman as well. I know that sounds pathetic, but they wouldn't have got in a van if it was a man asking
they
it
wouldn't.
to. So Myra Hindley she's just as guilty as anyone else, I think.
And I think the mugshots as well.
Oh yeah, they're
because
famous,
there's such
aren't they?
infamous pictures now. Both of them instantly recognisable. They both look defiant on them. I don't know if that's deliberate or not, but apparently when they were having the picture taken, because they didn't expect to have the mugshot taken, and the light was that bright that they sort of tensed up a bit. But I can't imagine them, putting on a sad face anyway. Very recognisable. There's an instance when I was 6 years old. They were back in the paper. Must have been when I think back. The extra, the Keith Bennett. And the other murder. I was in my grandma's house, like Myra Hindley often was. And she said to me, she showed a picture of the Moors murders, and she went, "Who's that, Rachel?" And I went, "The Moors murders." And she said,
"How old were you?"
About 6. And she was proving a point to my father, apparently, about how recognisable that image is, and how recognisable it is to people, and the fact that me at 5 or 6 could recognise it. But I just think it was an early warning sign of my weirdness, to be quite honest. She also did the same with Adolf Hitler. There was a picture of Hitler. My sister's 6 years younger than me. There was a picture of Hitler in the newspaper, and she said, "Oh, Amy, come here. Who's this?" And my sister went, "Oh no, don't tell me. I know the song. I know the song. It's Hitler." I could only hope it was the One Ball song, not anything more sinister.
Ian Brady's still on hunger strike because he has like a feeding tube up his nose, doesn't he? And he claims because he wants to kill himself that he's on hunger strike. Although, rumour has it that he loves a cream egg.
Cadbury's cream eggs. Yeah. Loves as toast every morning and a cup of soups.
He's a bullshitter. Essentially. He's such a narcissist as well. That a few years ago, they did a programme about the Moors murders with Maxine Peake playing Myra Hindley in it. In that, one of the scenes, they're driving along in the car, they're drinking booze, and Ian Brady throws a bottle out the window. Apparently he wrote to ITV, "Listen guys, I watched that and I would just like to make it very clear that I have never littered in my life and I resent the accusation." Is that fine with all the child murders, but like, I'm sorry, I'm not a litter bug.
I'm not a litter bug.
He's in Ashworth near Liverpool, sort of living out his last days. I don't think he's got very long left.
No, I don't think he's got long left actually. I think it's very important that he is not allowed to kill himself.
Yeah, because he says, I'll show you where Keith Bennett's body is, but I have to be allowed to kill myself, knowing that they would go, of course you can't do that. So I don't think he wants to kill himself, because he would go on proper hunger strike if he did.
Yes, he would.
He just moans constantly about the conditions, about the temperature of the showers and things like that. I think that they killed more.
When you consider all the photographs that they had that he was so desperate to get hold of, and obviously a lot of the photographs were used as for their pleasure to commemorate where they'd buried certain victims. They went all over in the car. They took hundreds and hundreds of pictures. There must be other bodies. I also think that Myra Hindley, the fact that she kept her trap shut, knowing fine well that there were 2 other children buried on the moors, for her own benefit, she kept her mouth shut. Nothing that woman said could have been trusted.
No.
And he also, it's just a rotter, isn't he?
Well, she allegedly became a Catholic and repented her sins and showed remorse, but I just think, again, it would have been a trick with her to try and get her. You don't keep it to yourself about 2 murders for 20 years and try and break out of prison if you're like, oh, I'm really sorry for what I've done, but I am going to try and escape. That is going to happen. And something that doesn't sit easily with me is how he's escaped being the figure of evil, whereas I think her picture is more recognisable.
Yeah. If you separated the 2 pictures, people would recognise Myra Hindley more so than they would
and
Brady.
She's become a symbol of evil. Yeah. And I think it is because this whole, well, you wouldn't expect it from a woman, which is silly, but at the same time, I kind of see where they're coming from. They just seem to... This has been the one that I found the hardest to talk about, and the one that if I've said to people, because people always go, oh, who are you doing on the podcast? And I go, oh, the Moors murders. They're like, oh. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it still seems to stay with people.
I've actually seen as well online, and just saying, like, a lot of people go, oh, you're doing the Moors murders. A few people go, oh, you sure you should do that? Well, you can't ignore it.
No.
It's a huge case, and we had to do it, didn't we? It would be bizarre if we ignored it. But there's also a few things that I've seen online that I find quite distasteful, and this is from me speaking as somebody who did a serial killer colouring book.
You can buy that as well if you want.
You can buy that if you want. It's just
tweet Rachel.
If you want one, give us a shout. Terrible advertising there, linked into something that I'm supposed to be outraged about. I've seen tote bags with people's mugshots on. Now, it's one thing me doing a colouring book, but it's one thing walking around the streets with a bag with Myra Hindley's face on it.
Especially in Manchester.
Oh my God, especially in Manchester. I was actually reading a book about Myra Hindley, and on the front it had that mugshot, and I felt uncomfortable reading it on the bus. And I'm like, oh God, I have to put this away. I feel really awkward. Richard Ramirez as well, the Night Stalker. Someone came in my works with a tote bag with Richard Ramirez on it.
That's bizarre.
It's just so strange. I mean...
Maybe they thought it was Che Guevara.
Is that... Or maybe it's like when you get those really awful fake bags. You often get them on markets. They're obviously made in China, and it'll be something like Iron Man, but spelt wrong.
Or like you get, on fairgrounds when they draw, when on those rides they've got famous people, so they just know it's a recognisable thing. They're probably on the side of some ghost ride somewhere as Myra Hindley's mugshot. Or on an ice cream van, when they do like dodgy Disney versions of things.
Fred West used to be an ice cream man.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, he did.
There we go.
Second mention in this episode, Fred West. We'll get to him at some point.
I think, and Rose has been mentioned. Well, the cover as well of Sonic Youth's Goo album, I didn't realise, because my fella has it on a t-shirt, but I don't think he realises, I'm going to go home and break it to him now, is a picture of Maureen Hindley and David Smith at the trial. Wow. So that famous iconic picture is those two. Obviously, they're both innocent. They didn't do anything that we know of. It's a picture of them, and I just think that's kind of macabre. It's weird, isn't it, to be sitting here doing a serial killer podcast and go, well, that is too far.
Yeah.
But there's just some stuff that doesn't sit very easily.
Yeah, there's some stuff that still makes us go, oh, that's a bit...
Yeah.
Distasteful.
So that's them, distasteful. I think that's a good way to sum it up.
Yep.
So next time we're going to be doing Peter Kern, aren't we?
Yeah.
Because we decided we needed
vampire.
We needed a cannibal. So yeah, we'll be doing that next time. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you enjoy it. I've tried to sort the volume out. Fingers crossed that's worked. Also, I don't know if I've done this already, but thank you very much for Logo Go Go for making our logo, because we get lots of nice compliments about it. So you can find them on Twitter, Logo Go Go, I think it's _UK, and they make great design stuff, so thank you very much for making that. Thanks so much for listening. If you've got any requests for who you'd like us to talk about, tweet us, at KillNoFillPod. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.